Shabbat Shalom. As has been mentioned, the blessings that Jacob gives the sons are interesting to say the least. Reuben is unstable as water. Shimon exercises the instruments of cruelty. To the tribe of Levi, I will divide them. And even the ones that are positive, Issachar is a strong donkey. The rabbis interpret that positively as that Issachar will be a tribe of teachers, and teachers are indeed very strong donkeys. So if you are a teacher and a good teacher, I wonder if you relate. You're like, actually, it's true. The tribe of Dan is a serpent by the way. Compliment. For God, a troop shall overcome him. Naphtali is a hind let loose, and so on. Benjamin is a wolf. Wolf sounds really good, but it's a ravenous wolf. So the ravenous kind of makes you wonder. So note that even the non-harsh ones have imagery that lacks any couching language. Is it a compliment to be called a serpent or a donkey? Is ravenous good or bad? Even the praiseworthy Joseph one. The vines are creeping upward, and the bow and arrow. The bow stays taut is understood in the Midrashic tradition as a statement about Joseph's physical beauty, with with vines being women that were always trying to seduce him, yet he is praised as keeping his bow taut instead of engaging in their offers. And this is the Father's blessing for him? How about saving the nation? Or, pardon me, Joseph saved 2 nations. The rabbis exercise the normal apologetics, and so they should. What did the classic commentators say? Well, the rabbis mitigate some of the harshness with their analysis that sees nuances that transform these rebukes into acts of leadership and fatherly love. They note that Jacob was careful to curse the behavior, not the individual, cursing Shimon and Levi's, saying, their anger, cursed be their anger, instead of cursed be they, because of their hot-headedness at the massacre of Shechem. Anger can be overcome, one's nature cannot. Rashi points out that each one has a give and take quality, so focus on the give and not the take. Midrash Tanchuma, along with much of the Midrashic tradition, focuses on the tribe of Levi. Scattering looks like a pretty classic rabbinic curse. Your people will be scattered. But after all, the tribe of Levi became the Levites, and they were scattered among all of the tribes, so they'll be everywhere, ensuring that every part of the land has a resident spiritual guide. So it just looks like a curse, but it's actually a blessing. Some of the rabbis provide fewer apologetics. The French commentator Rabbi points out that by rebuking them on his deathbed, Jacob ensures that they understand the gravity of their actions. He forces them to confront their flaws so that they can improve. Centuries later, the Italian commentator Sforno agreed, arguing that Jacob was acting as a responsible national founder. Since a leader cannot be someone who acts on impulse without forethought, Jacob's rebuke was a functional assessment of who was best suited to lead the future nation. And that Sforno's assessment makes sense to me, because when you think about it, all of the patriarchal and matriarchal narratives blend family dynamics with an origin story of a successful nation. Jacob's speech to close Genesis is the climax of this arc, making choices among progeny of who is best to lead, regardless of birth order or favoritism. If that's the case, then Jacob really gets an A+. But even if you want to provide apologetics for the harshness, the rabbis point out the unavoidable and clear contrast with the next set of deathbed leadership blessings of the tribes, which are Moshe's at the end of Devarim. In those blessings, the rabbis acknowledge Moshe's words about each tribe are intended to encourage and unite the nation for the upcoming conquest. He omits rebukes entirely. Rashi even suggests that Moses' beautiful blessing for Reuben is a form of healing for the curse elements of Jacob's criticism, because now Moshe is saying the criticism is long past. What if we don't apologize for Jacob's harshness? Why don't we embrace it for a moment? I'm thinking about the distinction the rabbis give between the Moshe's blessings and Jacob's blessings. They say Jacob's blessings are a form of magid. Remember, magid as part of the Haggadah, same root. It's a telling, or the Maggid of Mesrich, a certain kind of mystic who has the ability to teach or to express through telling. Moses' blessings they call an act of tefillah, an act of prayer. Why? Because Jacob's words as Maggid are a telling and a revealing, and Moses' blessings as tefillah are praying to God that the tribes are granted what they need to succeed in the specific territories. So in other words, to put it in modern terms, prayer incorporates the aspirational and the positive and sees a positive future. Maggid deals with the present moment and sees it clearly. So if Jacob's words are a form of Maggid telling the way things are, shouldn't they be even more couched in softening language? So last week I brought up Yoreh and Malkosh. It's in the second paragraph of we pray 2 times a day following the Shema, and I talked about it in relationship to widespread drought in major cities across the globe that are failing, that if the Yoreh is the soft rain that softens the ground, so when the hard rain comes, it can be absorbed. And if you have a period of drought and you get none of the soft rain in its due moment, and you just get the hard rain, it just runs off. And so in a way, what I'm asking is that often when you're trying to bring out someone's better qualities or help improve them, you must begin with Yoreh and not Malkosh. You have to begin, if you're in a supervisory role or a mentorship role, you have to kind of start with the aspirational. Oh, I see what you were trying to do there. And you have so many qualities that lead to success. I loved how you did this. And it's a lot of softening rain before you get to the Malkosh, which is, but how would you look at the results of what you just did? Do you know what I'm saying? You've got to couch everything in a softening and praiseworthy and emotional language, because we're not allowed to go right for the Malkosh, which is, I don't think that went well. What can we learn from this? In the last 2 decades, we've seen an increasing number, and I'm fascinated by this, of feminists and others question how we understand the social expectation of softening truths before they are delivered or without delivering them in order to accommodate others' needs and in order to please. So I'm old enough to remember the work of Carol Gilligan and others 4 decades ago. And I interpreted some of that work to say that accommodationist behavior, giving others credit before taking credit yourself, being mindful of the needs of others, valuing listening as a leader over speaking, were seen as feminine traits and were degraded. The boy interrupting rather than raising his hand was a natural leader. The girl who can praise others was a natural follower. The conclusion of Carol Gilligan and others was, how about acknowledging that women who listen, nourish others, listen better, and are more concerned with the success of the whole team may actually be better leaders than the ones who are self-promoting, who put down others in office relationships, for example, when supervising. So as a way of lifting up the nourishing Yoreh qualities, the accommodations qualities, the pleasing qualities, is actually saying that makes great leaders. But I've seen in the literature a bit of a backlash to that. More recent feminist theory, including a book I find fascinating by the British feminist Victoria Smith, it's called How Be Kind Entrenches Sexism. Questions whether praising people-pleasing actually entrenches sexism rather than solves it. She, among others, questioned whether be kind is a kind of trap for women, since it reinforces a role of pleasing others or self-sacrifice over other things, and not just over a woman's own needs, but it's deeper than that, perhaps over being a Maggid, perhaps over telling things the way they are. So is people-pleasing good for anyone, and when? So recent literature on perimenopause and menopause questions whether these are to be experienced as negative because a decrease in hormones like estrogen and chemicals like oxytocins decrease the impulse to nourish and please others and put others' needs above your own, like the needs of children or of elder parents or of others for whom you are assigned caregiving duties over oneself. Or might the hormone-laden state be considered nature's coping mechanism for that time of life, and menopause a time for freeing oneself, right? For a time that one can finally be real. It's not that you're then selfish, it's that you're truth-telling. You're real. You've come into your own. For sharing a view of the world which stops couching everything in the softening language, without having to consider the responsibility to take everyone's feelings into account, to nourish their growth over your own. In a recent essay by Ellen Scherr, The Neuroscience of Why You Suddenly Can't Pretend Anymore, the way your body is telling you to stop people-pleasing, she rehearses some of these arguments. She begins the essay by saying this: you're in a meeting. Someone says something objectively wrong. And instead of doing your usual dance, the soft correction, the diplomatic phrasing, the careful preservation of everyone's feelings, you just say out loud, "That's not accurate." No cushioning, no apology, no emotional labor to make your truth more palatable. And everyone looks at you like you're crazy. She says, welcome to that point in midlife, and I don't think it's limited to women. That's why I related to Yaakov. When your capacity to pretend, to perform, and please others starts shorting out like an electrical system within you that has had enough. Maybe it's an aspect of just growing older, regardless, or in addition to gender components. Look at Jacob. This is what he's doing. There's no attempt to make his words palatable. There's no attempt to say, but let me first tell you about all your great qualities and all the great things you've done. He's reached an age where nature within your body is saying that you can tell the truth without people pleasing. It's not your job to make them feel better. You might think you're becoming difficult or impatient. You're becoming one of those bitter old middle-aged people you were warned about. But maybe what's actually happening is your brain is restructuring itself. For decades, your prefrontal cortex, the part of your brain responsible for executive function, social behavior, and impulse control, it's been working overtime. It's been monitoring social cues, calculating risks, suppressing authentic responses, and managing everyone else's emotional experience. It's so exhausting that you're not just emotionally worn out, but your brain and your body are physically worn out because it's not sustainable. Maybe your brain is going through synaptic pruning. Neural pathways that aren't essential are getting trimmed away. It's a little bit like Marie Kondo within the brain. And all of those pathways devoted to hypervigilant people-pleasing, they're often the first on the chopping block. They're wired and then they're dewired. What replaces it isn't bitterness, it's clarity. The accumulated cost of a lifetime of performance. What if you didn't feel required to read the room, adjust your tone, soften your language, make yourself smaller to make others feel comfortable, laugh at jokes that aren't funny, agree to opinions you don't share, explain things carefully so no one feels threatened by your knowledge? Right. Maybe we should take into account the concept in psychology called decision fatigue, which is there's a deteriorating quality of decisions made after overly long sessions of decision making. Maybe this also applies to nourishing. An exhaustion from nourishing others over yourself. Maybe there's a fatigue that naturally tells you to stop. Maybe you should stop worrying about not being a team player. Maybe you should not worry what people think of you if they say, are you going through something? Maybe you shouldn't care if you're difficult to work with. I was shocked not so long ago when I was talking to a colleague, and I said, I find it increasingly frustrating that in supervision work, how much of my time has to be devoted to nourishing and building up the other person before I can just sort of look at something and say, well, let's look at what didn't work, and do you have ideas of what you would do differently? And I said, I'm kind of tired of how hard it is to get people to see the excellence of the institutions having a higher priority than their own boundaries and efforts. And his response to me is, you can't have the malkosh without the yoreh. Like if your wish is to get to the hard truth-telling without going through all of the softening and the building up of another, then that's on you. Although I wonder for those of you who are mentors and have been mentors, wasn't the mentor relationship something a little bit more covenantal and holy? That each was giving up a part of themselves and risking something to make both of you better, rather than just one person nourishing another? So is it my character flaw? Is it my age? Is it Jacob's character flaw? Is it his age? Is it a decrease in patience and commitment? Or is maybe there a natural development implanted by God? That there's a time-wasting and even counterproductive element to too much yoreh. I relate to Jacob. When I think of him not as this is not some romantic scene of a deathbed in a movie and a fairy tale, but as just someone who's middle-aged. I think of the line from the essay, when you stop cushioning every truth, reality becomes clearer. Problems that were obscured by diplomatic language become visible and therefore solvable. And that's how you gain real relationships. Some relationships will end when you stop the pleasing, but what remains are connections based on who you really actually are. Your relationship evolves into something more authentic, or it dissolves because it was never based on something that was truly authentic in the first place. It's an unexpected gift. It's practice for being fully alive. It's what Jacob becomes on his deathbed. Magid. Shabbat Shalom. Service continues with Musaf, middle of